Actually, should have opened right within share.
Yeah, he sent me a link and I couldn't get it. I don't know if you put it together. This is what that was. The software. He sent it like right
Ready to go to sleep.
Busy later.
Oh, mine's good.
I do not know. I'm actually on my personal hotspot.
Okay.
If you want to ask the front desk, I might.
Is this the file that's under the...
No. So I actually here. Look, I just opened it up. So if you're in the FY 26-27, go under questions, and then BFRB questions. This is the consolidated list of all of the questions that we've had, and it includes the question and then the answer. So it's BFRB questions. And Caitlin's been doing a great job of updating as we've gone through.
Mr. Bailey will not be clerk.
Oh, he will not?
Did you call you?
No, I did not get notice that it's
Yeah, these are my sort
And Brandon is not here yet. Caitlin, have you heard? Caitlin, have you heard from Brandon tonight? Okay.
He's got a lot of experience with probably helping. Started working in yeah, that was cool.
You don't want no.
No.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Tuesday, April 7th, 2026 meeting for the Smithfield Budget and Financial Review Board. For emergency evacuation and health notification, we are in a little different of a room, so I don't have this one memorized. However, if you go to the back of the room, to the left, is the main entrance and exit for the police station. Another exit is front of the room to the left, and it's a direct exit. The restroom facilities are to the rear of the room, to the right, and there is a small corridor to the right. Item C on the agenda is the vote to approve the meeting minutes for March 31st, 2026. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes? Are there any questions or comments related to those? All right, can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, opposed? None. All right, moving on to item D, the overview of and discussion on the FY27 school department budget. I want to thank everyone who's shown up tonight. I'm really encouraged by the support from the community that I see related to the passion for our school district. I would like to extend a special thanks to Assistant Superintendent Lisa for her great collaboration in getting to this point here. So without further ado, if you'd like to take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I want to thank everyone for joining us. It's great to see the entire school committee here, as well as some council members and certainly some teachers, staff, and administrators. and most importantly, the admin team here that's helped put this budget together. So thank you so much for coming. As Ian mentioned, my name is Lisa Valella. I'm the interim superintendent here in the district. John Ward is our interim finance director, so John's been with us since mid-January as we worked through some of the budget pieces here. So he walked into this underway with our prior business manager that's only here for about 6 months or so. And then we have the rest of the team. Most of them are here. Our interim assistant superintendent, Wendy Amelot, is in the back, as well as our special ed director, Aline, Dana Crudell, and Dave Burrows, as well as Angelo Manicucci. So our team is here along with most of our administrators, so thank you all for coming. So just as a refresher of why we are all here, we are here supporting here the education of Smithfield Public Schools. Our strategic plan is focusing on increasing academic excellence, increasing innovation in our schools and engagement of our students, increasing social emotional learning and supports, increasing communication and transparency, as well as improving facilities. So this evening I will take you through our budget overview of how we got here, what we're asking for, what the school committee has approved, and actually even some minor adjustments have happened since we submitted the school committee's approved budget. Because as you know, this process comes at a time where we're still doing a lot of work. We still don't know actually the official amount from the state. We're still working internally with some numbers that change, and so we'll give you some updates as well on where we are currently since this budget was approved by the school committee. And then we can talk about how the town proposal may affect us moving forward. So just a little bit of a history of our enrollment with our students. As you can see, over the years, our numbers have fluctuated. We're seeing a slight decline across the district, primarily at the high school is where we're seeing the biggest decline. We see a little bit of a decline at Pleasant View, and the other schools are pretty well maintaining. We have some fluctuations. Those go up and down. The middle school, again, is another area that fluctuates as it goes from students going into the middle school and then coming to the high school. We have a lot of movement between private schools and career and tech, and we'll talk about career and tech in a few moments. You may have questions as we go through this presentation. So likely the questions will be answered as we go through. If you have a burning question, please feel free to stop me. But otherwise, maybe at the end, if there's any questions, we can tackle questions so that way we're not getting ahead of ourselves if the questions are being answered in an upcoming slide. So our biggest driver this year is around curriculum changes that are required from the state. So there's the curriculum legislation that requires all districts to adopt high-quality curriculum materials. And so they need to be aligned to standards, they need to be aligned with the curriculum frameworks from the Department of Education, and they need to be aligned with our statewide testing. So you can see here that the selection was required for math and ELA for 2023, and June of 2025 for science. Last year, the General Assembly did approve the extension. We are now at the updated time where we need to have new science materials by legislation for the fall of 2026. So Smithfield Public Schools has certainly followed these adoption timelines. We actually are in compliance for math and ELA. The state put together some initial list of required curriculum materials that are available. So the Department of Education creates a list of what is approved and not approved, and those are the curriculum materials that we are required to choose from. So for math and ELA, those lists came out in June of 2020 and January of 2021. They've done some modifications on those, and science was the most recent one. Unfortunately, with science, there's actually only a few to choose from. So the state is actually not fully in compliance with the legislation for science. They're supposed to have at minimum 5 to choose from for districts. We were still only at 3 or 4. So we'll see, there is conversation that they might postpone it for next year to another year. But either way, we're just kind of kicking that down the road. We do need to update our curriculum materials because what we're currently using for science, especially at the elementary level, is outdated. Those kits are no longer even being put together by the East Bay Collaborative, and so we're actually managing them ourselves this year. So you'll see that we have been looking at curriculum materials over the year. This is our elementary. So back in 23-24, we implemented math. We selected Eureka as our curriculum here. It was very helpful to have ESSER funds available at the time because we used a lot of that money to actually cover and manage that request and mandate for curriculum materials. So we spent a lot of money here in Smithfield from our ESSER funds to get it up and running. So we purchased 3 years worth of materials, workbooks, the digital licenses, professional learning, actually isn't even in this, but there was a lot of money spent on rolling that out. ELA is a little less expensive because there aren't the consumable workbooks, there's the digital licenses, and a lot of the materials are digital. Science will be, is proposed to be this year. We are looking, actually, as we've been going through the process, leaning towards Smithsonian science. And that will require an initial expense for science kits to the tune of about $160,000. We actually put that in our capital request because those are large items. We'll be purchasing those kits. So in conversation with the town manager and the town finance director, we look to move some of those bigger items, curriculum items, into our capital expenses, which you'll see coming up. Once those are purchased, however, just like math, there's the ongoing expenses of workbooks or licenses. In the case of science, we'll need additional materials to keep those kits current. So some of the things will be permanent, like microscopes and those types of things in our kits, and then the rest will be that need to be replenished. So slides or samples and things that the kids need to do as they're exploring science. It's a hands-on program. The middle school, we're not seeing a significant change for this coming school year. It's really just our instructional supplies, our ongoing annual consumables. No big ticket items at the middle school for this year. They've been rolling out Science Open SciEd, which is an open resource, so there's not as many expenses along with that curriculum. For the high school, as you may know, the secondary regulations for graduation changed over the past few years. World language is now a requirement to graduate, as well as civics. And so it's just at the timing where Spanish licenses and textbooks have ended at this school year, so we need to purchase new materials. So included in this year's budget is a 5-year license for the Spanish, and then in the capital request are the actual textbooks. We do not buy textbooks for every student. We don't carry around a big bag of books anymore. So we do have classroom sets that stay there, thus the capital expense thought behind that with the town manager's conversation. And then the rest is put onto the operating budget because it's ongoing licenses, materials, and related materials to the curriculum. Our next big driver, as always, is special education, and I say that lovingly. But it is one of the most challenging departments to really predict what is going to happen in special education. We held a workshop to really dig into how that funding works several months ago to look at the influx of transportation, out-of-district tuition, the services that students need for their IEP. And so this is our best estimate based on our current student enrollment and their needs. Again, factoring in some of those costs around transportation, but certainly tuitions, if we're sending someone out of district, if someone is coming back in district, maybe that needs a paraprofessional. The professional and technical services are really around, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech behavior therapists. So all of those services are factored into the support services and additional technical services. So you can see a slight increase every year depending on the number of students and their required services. Another factor that impacts our budget is really this fluid movement of career and tech. So career and tech is certainly something that's near and dear to my heart. It really is what's going to make our high school the flagship of the district. We want students to be coming here for our great programs, and we also want our students to stay. So this past year, we just received approval for the biomed program that's in, this year is the first year running for Smithfield students. Next year it is RIDE approved, and we will be able to take in students from other districts for biomedical. But we also offer business and finance, culinary arts, informational technology, and cybersecurity, teacher preparation, computer science, engineering technology, and law and public safety. Students are leaving for these other categories here, and if you notice, some of them are duplicates. So that is actually now allowable under the regulations around career and tech, as long as we are not substantially similar. And there's a whole process that goes through the Career and Tech Board of Trustees to determine which programs are substantially similar. So having a different curriculum or a different work-based learning experience makes them slightly different. But then others are leaving for programs that we don't offer here. Students can apply and take into account certainly facilities and other programs that the school may offer that we may not. For example, there's always a conversation around Warwick schools. They have their career in tech, it's in a different building, and because of that schedule, those students aren't able to take AP courses that they haven't. I think they're trying to resolve that. So many students may want to go to those programs, but they don't get the same experience as they do here at Smithfield because we're in a comprehensive high school. Students can take these programs and still have access to AP courses and the like. We actually have all of our programs, our students leave with an industry credential, and many of them have also college and career credits that can be transferable to other institutions. So we've seen an influx of students that come in for these programs. This is a combination of both Smithfield students over the past several years and out-of-district students and why they're coming here. So our programs, our teacher prep program, as you can see, was very high back several years ago. That's the blue line, if you can't see it from way in the back of the room. And so that is certainly leveling out. That is not a profession that unfortunately people are looking to move into. We're hoping to encourage people to come into teaching, but it is certainly a challenging career. And you can see some of the other programs depending on engineering. We lost teachers. That program actually was not running for a couple of years, and so now we've just resuscitated that program. We've got some new great staffing. We've implemented Project Lead the Way, and so we're really trying to bring those programs that you can see had some zeros. Culinary didn't start until just the past couple of years, and biomed, you can see, is just starting up. So we want to grow those programs and find things that students are interested in coming to. The accountability for our high school has this data built into those results. So when you see that Smithfield High School is a 4-star school, this is part of the reason, in addition to a whole host of other things. But how students are doing in career and tech, in post-secondary education opportunities, so AP courses, college courses, dual enrollment courses, all of that factors in on how we keep and can maintain at least a 4-star. Obviously the goal is for a 5-star, but these are all factors on how our schools are rated and why students want to come to Smithfield High School, not just from out of district, but our own students here in Smithfield. We want to keep them here. I think an interesting telling data point across the state, but we are definitely seeing here, we're one of few districts that have the 100%. Across the state, we see that students who are in CTE programs, their graduation rate is higher than students that are not in CTE programs. They're engaged, they're already figuring out what they want to do, they're trying to understand what's the next step for college and career leaving here. And so, as you can see here, our CTE students last year, this is last year's graduating class, 100% of the students graduated in 4 years, where our non-CTE students, we had 92% graduate. Our overall, when you combine the two, our school graduation rate is 93.95 from last year, which is phenomenal. So kudos to the staff at the high school for keeping that going and supporting students. And so we want to keep that motivation and that momentum going. So where the money comes in is around tuitions. So we have a handful of students this year, combined from grades 9 through 12, about 55 students that we spent sending out of district. So 22 currently are headed to Davies and 22 to Foster Gloucester. Those are our two biggest competitors. The tuition fluctuates depending on the difference between our per pupil expenditure and the sending district's per pupil expenditure, whether they're free or reduced lunch students or have any other special education needs. So the tuition may fluctuate. We have a handful of students that come from Woonsocket, Cranston, Johnston, and Scituate. I combine those because the numbers start getting too small, and so I don't want to just identify one student from Scituate, for example, that type of thing. And then from Lincoln, North Providence, Cumberland, we have our Northwest Consortium. So the first 3 students that come from each district, we receive $5,000. We have a combination, an agreement, so that way all of the money doesn't go there. Likewise, if we send a student to any of the school districts in the Northwest Consortium, we only lose $5,000. So we're trying to, as a group, support one another and encourage if a student really doesn't want to stay here in Smithfield or something that we don't offer, we'd love to encourage them to go to another Northwest Consortium school, so that way we can support each other around the tuition. So far, this number does fluctuate as students are still applying and still deciding of going out or coming in. We are very excited to report that we're at least right now balanced. So for several years, Smithfield actually was upside down. Up until last year, we had more students going out than we had students coming in. So it was actually costing us money to send students out compared to what we were doing here. Fortunately, bringing in other programs like culinary, like biomed, and certainly improving the programming in our other programs, we are now seeing students coming in, and based on tuition right now, we are actually pretty balanced. So right now, it's canceling one another out. So although we're losing students, we're bringing in other students, and so this is about a net cost of 0. The next big bucket of funding impact to our budget is staffing. So staffing is about 80% of our budget. To get to a 4% ask, so we have asked of the town a 4% increase. I believe you have the budget numbers, but we'll get to those shortly. When we started the process several months ago, we asked the school committee, we asked our principals, what do we really need to support the students that we have in front of us? If you recall, if you're not aware, over the past several years through the pandemic, with ESSER funds, we actually had math interventionists at the elementary level to help students that are struggling with math. We do not have those. Those were cut over the past couple of years because the ESSER funds went away and the local budget could not sustain it. And we also have other needs. So in addition to elementary interventionists, so in the past there was 2, even though we have 3 elementary schools, we had one at Pleasant View and one that was shared between Old County and La Perche. We tried to put those 2 back in. We had a request from the high school principal and the school committee to really try and support having some type of alternative learning program, ALP, or in-school suspension, a combination of both, to support our students that needed a place to get some extra support, needed a break if they're having some behavioral difficulties, again, supported with our behavior specialists. and for a handful of students that we do have on occasion that need an alternative to out-of-school suspension. We really don't want to send students out of school for suspension. We want them to be in the building, we want them to be learning, we just need an alternative placement. We don't have that. That is rare. In all of the high schools that I've worked with over the past several years, both in the districts that I served and when I was deputy commissioner at RIDE, it is very rare to not have an in-school suspension program in the high school and in the middle school for that matter. We have students, if they need to be suspended in school as opposed to out of school. We can only suspend out of school for serious altercations, weapons, really high-end against our code of conduct. Right now, they're sitting at a desk outside of the principal's office in the hallway, really being kind of, it's just not conducive, one, to their learning, nor is it appropriate. So Principal Ward, they're all having to close their doors, you can't have a conversation. The students are sitting right there in the hallway as they are trying to conduct business in the front office. And we see that across the district. So they had asked for having some type of alternative placement at the high school. When all was said and done, my original budget request from the district to the school committee was at a 5.5% increase to the town, which clearly we can't ask. But that's really what we needed to be where we were with our curriculum needs and with our staffing needs. So we worked, unfortunately, to get our ask down to 4%. And in doing so, we cut the following positions. Position at the middle school, someone resigned and we're not going to fill that role. We have 2 positions at the high school. Those folks have not received their layoff notices. We're hoping as we go through this budget process, maybe there's some way to reduce some of these numbers that you'll see in the rest of the presentation. But starting with 2 less teachers because of the enrollment decrease. So we want to be fiscally responsible. Enrollment has gone down at the high school. And so we took it very serious to say, all right, let's try and start this year, this budget process, with cutting 2 staff at the high school. To be determined. But we knew we were going to have 2. So Principal Ward was given the marching orders as she was trying to work with her budget. We reduced the STEM coordinator. She's done a fabulous job helping to implement all of this curriculum. But unfortunately, it's one of these nice positions to have, but we just can't sustain it. If we were going to be looking at staffing at the teacher level, we really wanted to take a look at our administration level. We do not have, at the elementary level, excluding Pleasant View, which is the largest school, we have 1 administrator in those buildings, not any others. We have a limited staff over at the high school, principal, an assistant principal, and a dean. And so there's really not a lot of space. Our business office is run on 3 people, that are helping our finance director. This is a very, very lean district, very lean. And so we were really looking at how we can balance some of those out. So we cut those positions. We removed the request of the in-school suspension. We removed the request of the 2 elementary math interventionists. The multilingual learner regulations require that we start adding staffing. Our students are not getting English language development services based on the new regulations that are in effect come 2030. I have 1.6 multilingual learner teachers here in the district to service our 50 students across the district. And so we need to slowly start making sure that we are going to meet regulations by 2030. So ask for a 0.4 increase there to make us to be at 2 staff servicing all of those students. And they travel between all of the buildings. That is how we got to the 4% request. As I mentioned, we really take it seriously. This is something that Principal Ward, Laura DiMuccio, who is in charge of student supports and guidance, myself and our assistant superintendent spent about 4 hours after all of the course requests were submitted from the school. So unfortunately, the budget process has its timeline, and the schools run on a different timeline. So after vacation, kids come back, and then we start looking at offerings for next year, and the kids start picking their classes. So what do you want to take next year? So they spend a lot of time going through that, as well as the 8th graders coming up. Once all of that data was collected, we looked at all of the courses that students were requesting, that they were looking to do, and then we went through. Okay, well, we have 30 kids in this course selection. We need 2 teachers based on the contract. The high school classes can be 28. Some classes need to be down at 25 if it's a matter of like workstations, so computer programming, those types of programs where there are limited resources. And so we literally went through every single course to bring us down to our minimum number of staffing to cover all the course requests. In doing that, we have captured, since the 4% budget that that the school committee has approved, we have captured another 2.6 teachers at the high school. So we're talking about a 4.6 reduction of teachers at the high school for this coming year, based on our numbers here, to service our students. And I was honestly hoping, as we were looking at that, as we were going through the budget, my initial plan was, wouldn't it be great if we could use some of that funding to bring back an interventionist, bring back in-school suspension staff, anything, because we have here, what could fund another teacher or 2 based on benefits. Unfortunately, when we did that, our numbers actually also came in from the trust. So when we started this budget process, we had our working rates from the trust that they were estimating. We never know until we get a little closer. We actually just got those numbers last week. Right? I was trying to figure out which week we're in. We got those at the end of last week. When we prepared this 4% budget request to you all from the school committee, we had a 10% budgeted request in there for medical and a 7% for increase for dental. Since then, the numbers from the trust have come in at 11.12% is now our new working rate, that this is what they're basically projecting for increase in medical insurance, and a 9.34% increase in dental. So you can see here, as we looked at staffing, we found a couple of other places where, there was substitute numbers were in a different bucket, and you all had some questions around some of those numbers. But coaches, and John and I getting this budget preparation that had come from other hands before we arrived. So there was some buckets of coaches were put in, instead of coaches' stipends, they were put in salaries. So when we finally cleaned up all of the salaries with the additional reductions, we saw this final savings of $218,000. With the benefit change of a 10% to the 11.12 and the 7% to 9.34, today our projection for benefits is now an increase of $235,936, which means we are still short, just shy of 17,000-ish around there. So all of the work of saving for staffing and really being thoughtful around that to be able to give you all, I honestly was hoping there'd either be savings or we could be doing something else that we had to cut, is just going to now cover benefits. And it's really heartbreaking. And many of you in this room have heard me of that it's keeping me up at night, and it's now still keeping me up at night. Because there's still this discrepancy on how we're going to get to where maybe you all or the town may want to be, because these are numbers that I have no control over. There is no room to make any further cuts at the high school. So we are at our staffing minimum here. Transportation is another big bucket. So transportation, when we created this budget, we were going to we're going to roll over our contract and take advantage of the 2-year extension with DAPCO and they were giving us a budget increase of 10.5% for next year and 12.5% for the following year. And the reason behind this huge increase is based on their contract negotiations. They have added pension opportunities and medical benefits to their drivers. And I'm not going to say that that's a necessarily bad thing. People deserve to have those things, but that's where we are with their increase. When we were going through the process, we just couldn't agree to some final language around who is responsible for the pension if there's a pension problem with the DATCO. DATCO wanted to put it on us. We don't feel that we should have it, and so based on legal advice, we have decided to go out for RFP, and so we are going to look to see if we can find a better deal. We are partnering with Lincoln as part of the Northwest Consortium. I'm hoping we're going to find some savings. We're actually putting out a bid, and it'll come through the process, but we're looking to see, is there a bus that we could share on the Lincoln Smithfield side that maybe they're picking up, Lincoln kids and Smithfield kids, and we're able to consolidate a bus? Are we able to do some other ridership consolidation based on some data that we received as part of a study with RIDE? They did several districts and they looked at where we could maybe have some efficiencies. Maybe we'll be able to capture some there. I'm working with the school committee to even look at our transportation policy. Right now, we hold seats for students that may appear on the bus. So you may see buses driving by with 10, 15 kids on the bus. And part of that is because there are kids that are eligible to be riding that bus, but they're not. So either they're getting other forms of transportation, or they've chosen just, they're walking, or they're carpooling, any number of scenarios. So we are looking to change the way that we look at that and have people register for busing. And if they're not using the busing, then we may be able to consolidate some buses there. If a student then needs a bus for whatever reason, change of work schedule, whatever it might be, there is a process in our proposal that has not been passed. It's just beginning to have discussions. There would be a process to allow students to then get back onto the bus if you're eligible, but it will hopefully allow us to be able to reduce some busing there. But either way, we're anticipating transportation to go up. We are also looking, as all of you, utility costs are going up everywhere. Custodian products, petroleum-based products, we're budgeted with a 10% increase. And then obviously we have our facilities projects that we are looking to improve our laboratories at the high school based on our stage 2 approval, as well as our elevator that needs to be fixed at Gallagher Middle School. Currently, the elevator does not work. It has been shut down, and students that need that to be able to move around the building have all been relocated to the first floor. So classrooms, teachers have all been shifted down, shifted up, based on student need because the elevator does not work. We need to fix that elevator this summer, and that is part of our plan. But it's not cheap. So that is coming in at about $125,000 for that project. That does not bring it to ADA compliance. It'll just bring it back to where it is. But someone who is utilizing a wheelchair in that elevator, you can't come in and then turn around and be able to face out to come out. You go in, you sit facing the back wall. When the door opens, you roll back. That's the elevator that we have. So that is technically not ADA compliant. And we also have our athletics budget, and we had a very strong push from students and faculty as well as administration to increase our offerings to offer volleyball. There was going to be a phased-in approach. There were going to be pieces where we're putting the structure into the floor and then buying the net, and then so it's going to be a 3-year phased-in project. And just with all of the drivers here in our budget, we have postponed that discussion for another year. What we did add in to make boys and girls lacrosse coach stipends comparable to the other sports that meet the same level of games and practices and what have you, to be comparable to soccer, for example, was an increased request. When lacrosse was put in, there wasn't a lot of money in the budget at that point either, so they brought them in at a much lower rate, and so that group has requested an increase. what it amounts to is a $5,000 increase to the budget. So there is that $5,000 increase in there currently. But we did not add in volleyball, and pretty much level funded athletics for the other requests that he has to try and keep his budget at a minimum. So to, look at the whole picture, our budget drivers, this is always, the big topic, right? So summarizing a lot of this, we have our medical increase is going up from 10% is what we were budgeted to 11.12. The dental increase from 7%, which is in our 4% ask to the town, to 9.34 based on the trust numbers from last year. Transportation is still an unknown, 10.5% to be determined. And then our contract obligations for teachers, paraprofessionals, maintenance, and administrators, trying to get those numbers to all balance somehow in this budget. Those are the big drivers there. And then I talked about our capital improvement. So we have our 5-year plan. We are looking to renovate the 2 bathrooms. As you recall, this town council approved our stage 2 application. So this year, we're slated to have 4 bathroom areas, so 2 lavatories. That was going to range anywhere from $600,000 to $650,000. We no longer need the OPM because they changed the rules a bit at the school building authority. So if you're under, what's the number?
2.1 million.
2.1 million project, we no longer need an OPM. So we've just saved $50,000 to $90,000 that we thought we were going to need. So that's good. So we're kind of bringing that number down a little bit. But we still need that architectural design, $90,000 to $130,000. As I mentioned, the elevator at $125,000. So our budget to keep these projects rolling based on money that's coming in from housing aid, what our agreement is with RIDE in regards to the MOA for the facilities to be able to keep that money rolling, is a budget range for this year in our stage 2 is $815,000 to $905,000, but because of that little shift, we had put in a request for $800,000. This is our target. So in order for these numbers, for our reimbursement to continue, to be able to have this agreement of what we have with RIDE with our plan and the funding coming in, we are targeted to spend about 1.3 every year. So the 800,000 plus that we have in capital, we should meet that target based on those. If we don't, then we are possibly in jeopardy of our stage 2 application, and we'll have to figure that out as we move through this process, how that impacts us. So our capital expenditure request to the town was for $800,000 for the capital improvements, and those are the stage 2 projects, both at the middle school and high school. The technology, all devices, we took out of our operating budget, put it into capital. So that piece there is through trying to replenish our devices for our students. So as we move into middle school, into high school, students are getting new devices. Our projectors are seeing some end of life. We haven't bought new projectors in the district since the elementary school rehab project. So we're starting to see some of those coming offline. Special education students, especially at the early grades, are using iPads as forms of either part of their communication or as part of their apps to help them meet their goals. Those were brought into here as well as teacher devices. So that technology and equipment are student and teacher devices along with the projectors, totaling up $309,000. And then the textbooks that I mentioned earlier, from the curriculum requirements. So the digital textbooks and the consumables, the workbooks, the kits, like all of that stuff that we can do that's going to be replenished will stay on the operating side. This is where requests for the capital. These physical items will be at the schools. They meet the requirements per Caitlin and Bob around capital. And so we have the textbooks for world language, social studies, and the science kits, coming to a $1.3 million request in capital from the town. The The next slide just, kind of breaks down where all the technology, and we'll go into all the numbers of where all of the devices are. But you can see here our focus is grade 5 and grade 9, grade 1 having some touch screens, the iPads for special education, staff devices, projectors. So the breakdown of where that $308,000 is going is on this slide here. So we do have, this is our fund balance that was audited as of June 30th, 2025. John, feel free to jump in here when we get to all of this minutia of fund balance. I can talk all day about curriculum and CTE, and we get into fund balance, and we'll leave that to the specialists over there. Currently, our audited amount is $2,381,000. We have some reserves that we are going to be tapping into this year. So we had an additional student that we needed tuition, out of district tuition, transportation. We had additional paraprofessionals that were not part of the budget this year. I had an extra classroom at Old County. We had several students over the summer, last summer, after this year's budget was approved. We had several students in third grade. Third grade this year across the district was at the 50 cap in each building, so I had 25 students in each classroom across the district, and then we were over at Old County, and so I had to open up another classroom. That teacher was not in this year's budget. So we have that additional cost. So I'm expecting that we will be using some of this approved reserves that the school committee has approved certain buckets. This is kind of a cap of where they're looking at that we could tap into. And so we do have an unassigned surplus of $1.9 million for fund balance to be able to help with these types of emergencies and items that we need, but is not something that we necessarily encourage or want to be balancing our budget on. So every time we do that, we read recently with Foster Gloucester's budget process, it's that same thing. If you're tapping into fund balance every year as a means to sustain your budget, you're eventually running into a deficit. And so we want to make sure that we're not building a structural deficit here. So our recommendation is to not tap into the fund balance to balance our budget. So I do have bigger versions of this if you would like some. So this is just for reference for you to ponder on and taking a look at our historical revenue from the state and the town. You'll see that there are a lot of ups and downs. The state over the years has given more money, and then they have cut money, and depending on how that has flowed through here in Smithfield, it then impacted the local appropriation. So often you see when there's a decrease in state aid, we see an increase in town aid. But what's happening is, at the end, our net is really still somewhat just balancing and maintaining the budget. So when you look at that over the course of the years, we have about a 2% increase coming from the town over the past 11 years. If we were to get the 4% increase up at the top is the 4% increase that we're asking for. On average, then, that will be 2% from the town over the course of the year, over the course of those 11 years. But you can see as you go back through the past 11 years, there are several where we're at less than 1% or 0% from the town. And then you can see the state aid, in contrast, has over the past 11 years given us just shy of 12% increase. And then you can see them kind of combined with the transportation and the increase and decrease. So together, all of that, there's been this average of a 3.5 increase, depending on how much the state or the town has given. But there's no movement there when everything is going up every year, on average, about 3%. So things go up, and we give a little bit, but we're still fighting this basically level funding, because as the increase of 3% happens every year, the town and the state, on average, when you put them together, we're still seeing that 3.5. If the town's budget proposal of giving the district $500,000 instead of our 1.382 request from the local appropriation. This is separate than the 1.3 million for capital. So in the 1.3 request to the town, a 4% ask, if we only receive the $500,000 as proposed currently, that gives us a 1.45 increase from the town. We're looking at a 4%. So we're looking at a big variance here of what I'm going to then need to do. And I will say, it's very stressful to try and figure that out. So here's a summary of where we are. Again, a capital request of 1.3, and then our proposed budget to the town for a 4% increase. Again, we've reduced a lot. We've taken things out of the operating budget, put it into capital. So I understand that that's still an expense, but it's lowering your maintenance of effort. So by doing so, that's a benefit to the bottom line of what you're doing year over year. We still need it, but it's a different way of funding it. And that was a recommendation again from the town in collaboration with us and the town. So we're hoping that you all will approve that and that the town council will approve that request. We've removed volleyball, we've removed positions as I've talked about, and now we're looking at the additional positions to get there. So when all is said and done, we are still looking at an $882,000 difference from the 4% ask from the school committee to some of the reductions that we've tried to make even since then, that we were trying to be fiscally responsible around staffing and getting, I promised that we would bring those numbers down if we could. And then factoring in those increases for benefits and transportation, everything that's coming here, we are now, with all of that movement that I've talked your ear off for the last 50 minutes, so thank you for your patience. We are still at a difference here, just in the operating budget, of $882,000 after all of those cuts. And I honestly, I'm open to suggestions from everybody on where to get that money. There's not a lot of discretionary. We keep using the word discretionary funds. There's not a lot of discretionary. Everything that I've talked about are either contractual, they're legislative, they're regulation, and there's certainly a way to be able to maintain the level of education that you all have come to expect here in Smithfield. So this discretionary number that nobody wants to talk about is certainly, and if you're watching the news yesterday, what's happening across the other districts across the state as well. There's sports. Sports are a foundation to our students' enjoyment. That's what brings a lot of kids to school. It helps their social emotional well-being as well. I am not advocating. I put a little note there. I'm not advocating that we cut sports, but honestly, it's discretionary. So when you ask me, how would I budget, how can we find the money? I don't know, but this is discretionary, and it's probably worth a conversation of where you all, want to move forward. When that budget cut, and I, started the week, I think, of last year's budget approval from the town last year, we'll be tasked with that. I know that won't be everyone else's situation to deal with when we're done, but we'll have to go back to the drawing board and figure out where the money is going to come from. So these will be some of the difficult decisions that we'll need to make if we receive $500,000 in a local appropriation. There's sports. There's the coaches, supplies, transportation, the Interscholastic League fees and referees, the ice rink. We spent $16,000 for ice rink, golf course rental, swimming pool rental, athletic trainer that we can't fund, and we don't have enough money to get an athletic trainer. So we have somebody coming on occasion, but every year that keeps getting cut. So we keep cutting that, we keep cutting that. We don't have enough money to actually hire a full-time athletic trainer. We've been trying, but at $65,000, last year got cut again, and so we just can't hire somebody. And then the athletic director. The other discretionary items that we have, we actually buy cap and gowns for our students, as well as some staging to help with graduation. So we could stop that practice and allow students to purchase their own caps and gowns. Some districts do that, some districts don't. Sometimes we do fundraising and student activities to try and do that. So it's $20,000. It's money, but it's not going to get us fully to the $800,000. Library books, last year we cut library books from all of the schools, so we could go back and, we didn't cut all of the library books, but we could certainly do that this year and cut $16,000, library books and periodicals. We have throughout the district at all levels about $15,000 in field trip transportation. So these are, trips that the district has enjoyed for various programs or grade levels, to be able to not always have to ask parents to be paying for everything. So that's $15,000 there. And then all of the club advisors. So all of the after-school clubs, the senior class advisors, all of those club advisor stipends that we pay throughout the district come to $35,000. So all of that, if we cut all of that, we'd be at $711,000, and maybe with a bus, I could get to $800,000. Or we're gonna have to look at other options, but trying to find, we could look at late buses. Not all districts offer late buses. We could cut that. That would save us a little bit, but that's something that we could look at. We could try to find other cuts, but as far as staffing, our classes are now going to be right at the cap or potentially over. That'll be a conversation with our teacher union friends over there. And so trying to look at all of that. Maybe we just cut junior varsity sports like that's being proposed in South Kingston. Those are the options that I have. I'm not sure where else they're going to come from. So our final summary here is looking at, needing this money. We're going to be in a shortfall. We're still going to need to come up with another $70,000 if I were to do all of those discretionary cuts. And we're going to be needing to look for possible other savings to get to that. Any questions?
So many. First of all, I want to thank
Sorry,
you.
it was like a long time, but
This was
there's
fantastic.
There's a lot too that goes into this. We've spent a lot of time. I know maybe it was more than you wanted, but I really felt that you all needed to hear the whole story. We're not hiding money. There's no money hidden. It's unfortunate that we're not able to do a lot of these programs that other districts are still able to maintain, but you are starting to see what's happening out there because of level funding over years. It is having an impact on many, many districts, and I'm hopeful that we can find somewhat of a resolution to continue the excellent education here in Smithfield.
So first, I want to thank you. This was a great education for us. It's one of the collaborative efforts we really look to every year when we meet with the different larger departments in the town, is to really understand the ongoings of the town, the specifics of that department, and why you have to ask of what you have. And we learned great things across all the major departments. I saw every member here taking tons of notes as we went through.
And I'll send you the updated
thank
presentation.
you.
And we had some, I wanted to meet the deadline, but we were still crunching numbers literally up until today. So.
What I'd like to do to structure the questions, because I know we have questions throughout the entire deck, if we could, to make sure we don't jump around too much as we ask the questions, let's reset to the beginning of the deck and walk our way through almost slide by slide so that we can hit the different questions as we go through. Because I know I have questions on probably 20 different slides.
And I'll encourage my team to join in if there's any questions that are geared specifically to your department.
So even a few back, okay, so this was...
So this is the very
Okay,
beginning.
so let's kind of just walk through, and as anyone has a question on any slide, please speak up, or a couple seconds later I'll prompt her to move to the next slide. So let's move forward.
Those are our strategic
Yep.
goals. This just lists the order.
All right, anything on enrollment history?
So just gonna go to slide, I don't want the answer now.
Sure.
I'm an assessment kind of person.
Yes.
I'd like to see something about increasing it. Not now. I'd like to see the assessment scores
so if you could provide that.
Oh, sure. Easily accessible.
And are you looking at that at a particular grade level, at?
I'm gonna let her decide, because there's 3, 6, and 11. Got that right?
Well,
Got that by federal law?
so it's 3 through 8, so it's 3, 4, 5, so it's all grades 3 through 8. And then we test the 10th and 11th grades. Different
Just follow
tests.
federal law.
Sure. So,
And maybe at least 5 or 10, depending on how it is.
sure.
Whatever you.
I have we did a data presentation on last year's data. I can send you the whole presentation if you'd like.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, any other questions on enrollment? Okay, next.
So just legislation reminding us. Timeline.
The curriculums, I did have a question as we go through here. So first was a little bit of a kudos. I really appreciate the creative accounting on moving the initial procurement of the curriculum into a capital request. I know it's not a standard thing out there for educational funding.
This is new for me.
But I think it's great, a great way to make it work, because it doesn't add that one-time purchase to the operating funds.
Mhm.
And I know that's part of the intent to avoid.
Absolutely, and that was certainly the idea of Caitlin and Bob, and we're trying to make that work.
Yeah. Now, for the initial procurement, the core curriculum, how long are those curriculums typically good for? Understanding you need the yearly re-up of the consumables.
So as you can see in the past, we've done a 3-year contract. When you have enough money to actually buy something, it is cheaper if you can do it in a 3-year advance. They give you, a better deal because they know that you're not going to just constantly be looking for a new quote. So in the past, we've used ESSER funds to buy that straight out. So most of the requests will either be, and again, it depends on which specific curriculum, but most of them are 1 year or 3 year. In the case of the high school Spanish, that quote is a 5-year contract. She really, Laura, Felicia, if you know Laura, she really worked them down. She was not taking no for an answer. So it depends on the year, and it depends on how, so you can get the numbers down if you do a longer contract.
And with the multi-year purchases, do you still have the yearly consumable spend, or is
So
that all inclusive?
So for Spanish, in that example, that'll be it for 5 years. So that 87,000 covers the licenses for 5 years, the student and the teachers, and then the textbook request is the one-time physical purchase that we put onto the capital. Whereas when you look at, if you kind of go back to Eureka, so we still have, that contract is ending this year. So this annual cost of 47,000 is the workbooks and the digital licenses. That will be a yearly cost moving forward. So we had the leisure of having all of that paid up front for 3 years, the licenses and the consumables. When we had that funding, it did not hit your pocketbooks. But now, keep it going, it now is going to be something that we will continue to budget. So you'll see a lot of that, so things that we did not have to purchase in the past, because you bought textbooks, I think at one of my previous meetings, we were able to shift some science money this year. But like the chemistry textbooks were literally falling apart, they were duct taped because we were keeping them so long.
But so you keep the standard textbook curriculum program for a long period of time is the point?
Yeah, it's generally 3 to 5 years. I mean, again, depending on the content, science changes, so we don't want to stay with, that content for too long. Other things, can stay a little bit longer. But there usually is anywhere from a 3 to 5 year review. We try to, and so I've been working, with our curriculum team to try to find a way that it's not all in the same year. Honestly, the world language caught me off guard. Like I didn't have that on my radar when I joined the district of what was coming. I knew science was coming, I knew math was coming, trying to balance that. The ELA for elementary is coming. We have a license that's through to, you can see here, till 2029, but that company is one phasing out. It's no longer going to meet the requirements for RIDE, and they're not supporting it anymore.
And that was actually one of my follow-up questions.
So we need to look at ELA next year.
Right. So-
That's on the radar.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that at one of the school committee meetings.
Yes.
And I had asked at that meeting what was being followed up to recoup that prepaid money.
Yeah, and we'll still have to, dig into that. I honestly have not had 2 minutes to dig into that question, but it is something that I would love to look at if we can get any money back. Where they're not supporting it anymore, I'm not sure if we'll be able to, but I'm happy to dig into that. But that's where, to me, even if the legislation gets kicked down the road for science for another year, we could potentially punt that a year, but now, next year, I'm gonna have science and elementary ELA. And so we really wanna be thoughtful in our cycle as we're planning with the district, as to make sure that if we do need to make a big purchase moving forward, that we have this cycle, that nothing sneaks up on us, and that way we don't have one year where we have a huge amount, and then another year where, we're just kind of maintaining. So there's always going to be an ongoing cost for most of these because of the digital textbook component. So kids don't take their books home, so we have one set, they sit in the classroom, and then the kids are able to access digitally at the secondary level. We do that less at the elementary, but at the secondary level, they're accessing the textbooks on the digital version. So anything like that, and the consumable workbooks, like the Eureka Math workbooks at elementary, those are gonna be annual. And then the big purchases are really if we either need new books or if we need to purchase new materials. So we'll see a need, as you can see, that hasn't been done since 2021, the ELA. That was early on during that legislation change, and so we'll need to be looking at that for next year. So,
Quick question.
Sure.
First, compliment, thank you for being creative, because I have about a whole bunch of things I want to talk about. I'm not sure I'm going to talk about today. I'll post them. Thank you for making the decision to move to capital. Because I wrote the question, is that really capital? But I
Right.
get it.
Yeah, I
And
have the same
compliment
question, John has the same question.
You probably,
Yeah.
part of that conversation.
Absolutely.
The question is, there was just a major discussion about 6 hours ago about Chromebooks as the second worst detriment to our society. We're not going to go into it right here next to phones, but hasn't most of the textbooks or all the textbooks moved to the Chromebooks? Or because you talk about physical textbooks, and I thought, rightly or wrongly so, at least for K-12, they moved more to electronic versions, which was the reason for the Chromebooks.
Right, so it's a little bit of both. Some content, so depending on the content, so certainly world language has both. And that's why you see the cost is pretty low. I mean, not at $16,000.
It's a license fee,
No.
I'm assuming.
It's the rest of the digital is the license fee. The digital component has additional things. You can take online assessments. You can, which the kids need to practice on. And I agree with you, we've had this conversation at the school committee level, and we're looking to see how much time kids are spending on their Chromebook. I don't want them on them all day long in the building. That's why you still want to have pen and paper and actual books and other things going on, so they're not just sitting there. That is a resource for parents, it's a resource for kids when they're home, and they do have other features that you can't see. So when you're looking at, the animation of how to solve an equation and everything's moving around and how you're, combining like terms, you can see all that in a digital way that you can't, see on paper and pencil. So there's those features there that make it, the state assessment, kids need to be able to drag and drop. They need to be able to do some stuff. So some of that is a digital literacy, but I agree with you. I did not want to.
So just so you know, I'm not against anything you just said. It's the fact.
Fine.
No, they don't know Windows. There's a big college article ready to come out about no business uses Google because of, talk about the reason. And so what they're doing is when they're going to work for a business or trade or college, they literally know nothing. And that's fine. But that's
Yeah,
that's
I will say
conversational coffee.
and I'd love to have that. In my former district, we moved to laptops and Microsoft products at the high school level. So there's the K-8 conversation and then the 9 to 12, which is certainly something that we could have here. There's a cost. But yes.
Any other curriculum-related questions? All right. So on the special education line for this whole category, one that I had is more of a general, the year-over-year increases, are we looking more so at an increased student count within it, general inflation, or that the needs of the students are more intense, or a combination?
All three, honestly. I see Eileen's nodding her head. We have had an increase of students that are eligible. As just like you were talking about devices and phones having, an effect, it certainly had an effect on all of our social emotional needs. So students are now just entirely on a virtual world and can't deal with people in real life. So we're definitely seeing a lot of that. And you can go into any room where there's a bunch of teenagers and they're on their phones not talking to each other. And so that is definitely a factor. So we're seeing more need for some behavior supports as well as IEP needs and tuition and transportation. Did I miss anything, Eileen? Do you want to add
No, I
anything?
mean, the contractual services too, so when we look at support services, those are services that are going directly to the student. And some of those services are for low incidence population, so we contract for a teacher of the deaf, we have a teacher of the visually impaired, we have an audiologist who is an educational audiologist. And so those, they increase their, rate as well. Same thing for tuition. So those non-public schools, if we are not able to meet the students' needs, their tuition increases. So we always factor kind of an average, 3%, 4%, increase in the tuition and those purchase services.
That, to expand upon, because I'm already liking how you're approaching this, okay? I'm going to give you that nice compliment because the previous two administrations did the exact opposite. And one of the areas is what he talked about, which is we've been asking for several years now, when we see large increases in psych, all right? And I said, okay, how many appointments are you doing? I want to see the trend. And then I was told, I'm going to put this on the record, we were told they don't have that data. And this was back and forth, I still have the emails. And I said, are they licensed, right? And I said, as a licensed person, you know and I know. That's the kind of stuff, and just so you know, I'm as tough, they're not in the room right now, but I'm as tough in the town. She can tell you, I want to see the trajectory of variable expenses, whether it's students, whether it's visits to a psychologist. Then it makes sense, because it's linear. It's not static. So I would, back to Ian's question, I would encourage you to provide those numbers too, so that we can see how you got to this point. If you get where I'm going in terms of, it's a linear progression.
So one thing we do have in our answer packet here that we haven't had time to fully review yet is for occupational therapists, we do have a count of the number of hours on a per school basis, both for the occupational therapist and the assistant.
Yeah,
So
what I'm looking for is trending over
Right.
a couple of years, because that's what we need to see. But I just got this, so. But that's what we need to see, because then that ties directly to what you need for license. And that is social workers, or psychologists.
Right, and it varies certainly by student need,
Sure,
and those
of course.
students kind of up and down, as well as also trying to be careful. We do step into that world in special ed of, we don't want to identify those
I don't want to
particular
identify, I just
students.
want to.
So when there's like one student that may need a service,
Yeah.
it does get a little tricky, and so
I understand.
we're not trying to be difficult, but we also want to protect, the needs of the child. If it's somehow the data can be identifiable, then we're really cautious on that, right? Usually we kind of operate around like an inside.
Just for a start,
But
because that means it's a small number.
any other special education questions? All right, let's move forward.
Okay.
Okay, CTE.
Anything in particular?
One more slide forward, I think it was, okay, it was on the income versus expense for me. There's that Northwest Consortium.
Yes.
And one note I've made previously is that we spend a lot more than we take in. So we have 4 students that are leaving district taking advantage of that. And then we're receiving 12 students into the district. So technically we get more money, but what's the average cost per student to educate a high school student? Is it 15,000 in our district, 18?
You know, I don't, do you know our per pupil off the top of your head? No? Do you know our per pupil of government? It's somewhere around,
I
I
don't
feel like
know
it's
exactly what it
17.
Okay, so the
Let me look, I'll get back to you.
no, it's just the general point is we're collecting 5,000, but it's actually costing us 17,000 for these 7 incremental students versus, or 8 incremental students versus what we're sending out of district. I would encourage us to revisit our participation in that part of the program. Because you're talking, I mean, rough math there, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 of incremental cost for that.
So what we don't do with CTE is as students are coming in, we're trying not to now add another class and therefore needing additional teachers. So when we look at the programs, which is something, you know, that we're just starting to look at with our new CTE coordinator, is that really when they're coming in, it's to fill the seats that would normally be empty. So although it may be like it's depending on
Okay.
what's sending out, it's not for most. If I have a criminal justice program, I can have 28 students in that class. I may only have 20 kids that are from Smithfield. This actually allows us to open that seat, have those kids come in, and be able to invest that money into the district. Because ideally, there's still those same number of seats in all of the other content area.
Yep.
So we want to make sure that that's happening. We would cut off. Like, we haven't gotten to that point where we have a waiting list. My former district, we had a waiting list. So whatever we can manage with seats that we have open, it's only an advantage to us to be taking in. When you start taking in more kids and needing to open more sections and then needing more teachers, that's where that breakage is.
That makes a
We're
lot
not
of
there.
sense.
So it feels like maybe there's you really kind of want to look at that bottom number, that hopefully we're not putting more out than in.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're at that breaking point. We have been in the past as a district sending more out than in, but it's filling those seats. So it's hope, right now it's washing even.
We don't have an incremental cost because of the
There's not,
additional
it's different,
students.
right? I mean, granted, there are, there's always the wear and tear of different things, but it actually is a benefit. Most programs, CTE is a benefit to the home district because we probably wouldn't be able to run the programs that we're running if we didn't have someone filling in those seats. So you can see like the numbers on some of the CTE programs, the newer ones are lower. We're hoping those will grow, but it's, we're combining classes, so like culinary 2 and culinary 3 are running together because there's small numbers. So we're not running a class of 3 and a class of 5. We're trying to put those together, it'll grow. Again, if those numbers don't grow in that program, then that's something as a district we need to reconsider, is it worth sustaining? So that's what so we're trying to look at to make sure that those numbers match.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm hearing so many great things from you, to be honest, because we never got the wage charge before, okay? One of the numbers that we got from the school department was if there was one class in one room for the 6 periods, it counted as 100%. And I knew that. Yeah, no, I have it on record.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff we need to stop doing. Now, my question to you, in compliments, is you're breaking even. I'm a numbers guy.
Yes,
You're
me
breaking
too.
719 versus $7
And again, this is just preliminary, we still have students
I don't think this
registering.
is the district's fault. I think it's Providence's fault. Because one of the things I said early on, and I'm looking at the numbers, was doesn't Lincoln have a culinary program?
Lincoln doesn't have-
So, this is rhetorical, I want on the record, is why geographically are there 2 districts with 1 CTE? Now, if the numbers were great, then let them go through it. It should be more regionalized, in my opinion.
So I
You're
said,
smiling.
I am
Good or bad?
smiling. Well, because I had this conversation for 3 years while I was at RIDE. I sat on the CTE board of trustees there. And that is a conversation that we have. There's actually a great map. If you haven't been on there, I'll send you the link. It actually shows you all of the programs and all of the districts on what they offer and where the transportation goes. Back in the day, you could only go to certain districts and you had to send your kids there or they stayed with you. There was no going to others regardless. That has changed legislatively and it became almost like another school choice situation. And so when you're looking at adding in, and that's where the substantially similar piece comes in. If a district is deemed substantially similar, so if you're talking about Lincoln and Smithfield, for example, right now our programs are not substantially similar. They have different equipment than we have, they may do a different work experience than we have. So it's not substantially similar. Doesn't mean that they're exact, but they're pretty darn close, right? So there's differences. If your program was substantially similar to mine, I could not allow the student to go there. So there's pros and cons to that, right? So there's not being substantially similar to any neighboring programs allows these programs to be able to come to us, right? If they were substantially similar, they couldn't come here and we couldn't go there. So it may still have ended up as a wash, but it allows, it's a two-way street. So you can either try to build a wall around your district and not let your kids out, right? And nope, sorry, you can't go there because, or you have this open doors that's happening, and what it's really pushing districts to do is you better have an awesome program to keep your kids. We have to find ways to invest in our programs, and that's what some of our neighboring districts are doing. When I was in I won't name names, but when I was in a different district, you can look me up. When I was in a different district, we were literally sucking more than half of the incoming ninth grade class from that district to my district for our programs. And the way that the district at the time was managing the budget was it wasn't balancing the budget entirely on those. It was using that tuition money to actually invest in the campus. And when you go to that building, it's beautiful. The programs are amazing. I'm happy to say I put in an ambulance simulator and all kinds of things that other districts don't have. And it was sucking, literally, more than half of that incoming ninth grade class from their own high school. And what they did is they rose to the challenge. And the new principal came in and he started building new programs, and they've actually brought back many of their students. And that's what we need to do. So it's not about, I can go and cut. We have the easiest way is to cut some of these. These programs aren't necessarily cheap either. So when you're using Project Lead the Way, these are national recognized curriculum that are approved by the board. When those are if you want to cut those and not offer those get college credits. There's articulation agreements that you need to have in there. When you want to have these amazing programs and our kids have the edge over these other districts, you need to invest in them. So that's what other districts are doing. If we cut the programs or we want to do that, again, even though there's a culinary there, there's a culinary here, and we could do something different, maybe we're keeping our kids in.
Well, I can only hope we can pinky swear on this one, that the school department, like any school department in the state, just continue to look at these programs, because at some point...
We finally officially closed this year.
I've never heard that before. I've never heard that.
Okay. We this year officially closed the construction program. So we had the pre-engineering, we revamped, so it took a little, we saw that there was some zeros. We took a little hiatus from that as we were trying to figure that out. I sat down with the staff at the high school early this year, I think even before Ms. Moore started, and we looked at how we could revamp that. We have a teacher now that's actually was an engineer in her previous life. She has that certification, and we're rebuilding that program. Construction is hard. You need to be able to meet the industry requirements, the amount of money. It's a great program. I would love to have it, but it's expensive, and you need to have the right certifications. We don't have that. The staff left. We finally had to throw in the towel and focus our energies. And so we cut that program officially this year from RIDE. We kind of cut ties from that, and we're focused on the pre-engineering, the criminal justice, and building the biomed, because a lot of our kids are leaving to go to biomed. 100% agree.
Any other tuition or CTE related questions? All right, let's go to the next one. All right, staff, big topic. 80% of the budget.
Maybe more, I don't know. This is my rough guess.
So one of the questions I had on this, so the math interventionists were cut a few years ago. And this goes to Ken's question a little earlier about test data. How have we seen, or I guess the question is, have we seen or recognized a change in the math scores for RICAS since that happened?
So last year, and there's always a lot of different factors, certainly.
There's cohort
having
variability.
interventions, what's interesting is because it's not year over year of necessarily those same kids. So when you're looking at year over year data, it's not always cohort data, first of all. But there has been incremental gains in both ELA and math across the district. But we are still seeing gaps, especially with our special education students. The math gaps are big. They're not meeting the standard. Eileen just reported out on, our special ed data. So we're still seeing gaps of students that, the kids that are on level are doing fine. It's the students that need that little bit of more.
Our vulnerable population is
We are not
big.
seeing the growth there that we should be seeing. And that's really the target. So when you look at it as a whole, like Pleasant View, we saw big gains, right? So there was an Old County, where's Old County? She's hiding in the back there. We're seeing gains. There's also the fact of taking that we're in year 3 of implementing the math curriculum, so as people get more comfortable with it. So there's a lot of different factors, but I do think as part of our NTSS, our multi-tier system of supports, that is definitely a weak link in really making sure that our students are getting, we have reading specialists, we never got rid of those, but we don't have that same level of support for math. I'd love to see those scores move. And that's why our scores outside of the high school we're a 3-star school. And it's really around, when you look at the rating, that's where the problem is. It's in our assessment, it's in our achievement and our growth around assessment. Not all the other stuff. Not about, teacher absenteeism, not about, any of those other factors that are in there, the survey works, all of those other indicators. That's not what's causing the problem. It really is around that achievement and growth.
With the ALP ISS, is there an overlap in expectations with the new position for the Dean of Students? And is there support capabilities there?
Well, so the Dean of Students is really that liaison and kind of person that's actually in the weeds of patrolling the halls and dealing with the problems in the bathrooms and in the cafeteria and in the hallways. He's more of, and I don't want to stereotype because he is a presence in the building, there's no question, if you know what I'm talking about. So, he's got that bouncer feel, right? But the kids love him at the same token, and so there is this level of creating this environment and a culture that the kids know that he's out there and he's on it, but he's also supportive.
Yeah.
So it's really a different role. Could part of his time, I think, potentially once Ms. Ward has a certified assistant principal in there, maybe there's a little piece there. In some of my previous districts, that position has been a full position. That position has also been something that it was a duty. And again, that's a contractual conversation. I can't just say, oh, we're going to make that a duty. I'm sure Mr. Martin over there would be like, time out there, time out. But those are the conversations that we certainly could have as we move forward, but right now there isn't that structure set up. But he is participating with it. So when that student's sitting outside of this board, that student is also sitting outside of the dean's office. So between the two of them, they are supervising that student. It's just not an ideal situation, right, because they're sitting there. Like, you're like, okay, he's potentially overhearing all of the business that's going on. It's just not appropriate. So could we find additional ways? Possibly. It would need to be a conversation, certainly with the union leadership and others.
Now, with the 3 FTE between the middle school and the high school on this slide, and then the 2.6 FTE on the next slide, how many of those are student-facing versus support or administration?
They're all student-based.
So these are teachers specifically?
Teacher specific, yes. So part of it is in response to the decreasing enrollment. So, we've made a pledge that if we have to alternate when an AP course is being offered, for example. So if I only have 3 kids in one AP course that we run every year and 5 kids in the other one, over the course of their 4 years, it's going to be offered, let's say, on the even versus the odd. Students will still be able to take those courses, but I can't keep running a class with 3 and 5 kids in there. It's just not fiscally responsible. And honestly, it's in some weird way, having 3 kids in an EP class, you're just not getting that amazing, academic discourse where kids are actually talking and having that experience. It's actually feels more awkward, in my opinion, to have 3 kids in a class, that aren't needing that level of need as our, we've just got, those classes are running with fewer kids than some of our special education classes. It just doesn't make sense.
Another compliment. Past 3 administrations, they won't talk about what you just said. Because they were offering, I think it was some honors course or something, American history, they were offering, and I said, why don't you do what I did when I ran the honors program? You offer it every other year. So again, as you just said, so I don't want to over-compliment you until I get to my question.
I'll take it, I feel like I'm waiting for the butt, but
We do student-teacher ratio, and that's the cost. Does it cost the same amount of labor to teach 3 as opposed to 25, 30?
And they were not easy decisions. We went through literally every single course. We were, like I said, we were there for 4.5 hours or whatever it was, and it's not an easy decision. I would love to run all the electives, but when students are not signing up, it's interesting because we have such an active music program at the elementary level. I hear a lot of kids are involved in music. It gets to the high school, there's so many competing things. We're just not seeing it. It breaks my heart, but the reality is that's not what they're selecting. They're looking for, like, maybe that's a hobby and that they're not going to use that as a career, and or it's just an interest, it's an elective. We're just not seeing it. That 0.6 is music, and it's hard to make those decisions. I don't want to take apart a program. And again, these are all proposed, nothing definite.
Right.
We haven't, given anybody anything, but I would love to save things. But that's really what we're looking at. So, trying to get to that number. Do we want to cut music and sports and those things? That's where we're at. We're at those tough decisions.
Any other staff-related questions? All right, let's move forward. Facilities. Okay, so you mentioned the elevator has a line item, 110,000 or something. I don't remember the number. And that still doesn't get it to ADA compliance. One of the things when I look at construction projects or really any sort of improvement project is I don't like having regret work. Investing money and still not getting what we need out of it. Do you have any information, or has it been looked at what it would take to move it where it actually needs to be instead of patching the problem?
Yeah, so to be fair, rebuilding the existing elevator will bring it to like new. We're not just taking some old parts and fixing it. It really is a complete, renovation of the existing. Richard and Jessica are certainly been involved with this since all of the building projects. It is involved. We don't have the space for it. I'll pass my over to you. Stop talking for a minute.
We'll get you the exact number.
Yes.
It's over $1 million.
Yeah.
It also has siting problems because there are there's soft ground in some of the places, swamp, high water table, things like that. Okay. But we did look at that. We also looked at it at the high school in terms of things there.
Quick question, you
Sure.
don't have the answer. You said it was, by doing this, it doesn't make it ADA compatible. And I'm assuming you're not breaking any rules by leaving it in its current status. Upgrading, of course, and changing parts and whatever, is that correct?
They were grandfathered in.
Okay,
That's-
so
that's what I was trying to-
that was going to be my follow-up.
That was
Thank
going
you.
to be.
But are we technically,
Well,
No.
I'm get the building guy, I don't care. But my point is, have you calculated how much it would be incremental to bring it up to 2026 standards? And you don't have to tell me now, but if we're gonna make a swing, and I'm not suggesting we are, but I'd like to see that number. Fair?
certainly put all that together, I think it's a bigger conversation around Gallagher, that if you're gonna spend $1.5 million on an elevator, I think we need to look at the whole building.
Well, I mean, it's arguably our most challenged.
The whole building
school.
needs a serious,
I get it.
So if you're gonna spend that amount and only deal with the elevator,
Yeah.
I think we're kind of
Well,
missing out.
that's what I want you,
So, and I haven't, gotten that far yet.
Just to give some additional context,
Yeah.
I mean, in these building conversations,
for both the high school and the middle school, the conversations are around the entire elevator shaft has to be put outside of the building.
Right.
It's completely new construction. There's not enough space where it is existing, especially at the high school. I think at the middle school, we have a little bit of space where we could have expanded it, but it still didn't meet compliance. So now we're talking about the exterior of the building, the complete shaft. Then we get into the ground, the water table around the middle school, issues we've had in the past, things of that nature, where we would put it at the high school. These were multi-million-dollar numbers when we reviewed them. So we knew, based on all the other things we need to do at the middle school, especially windows, doors, and work at the high school, that was not feasible at this time. It's part of the extended plan, but not anything we could do now. And we have children, as they stated earlier, who literally can't get to the second floor of our building. So this was an immediate fix.
Yeah.
That was
Right, this is a health and safety issue as
Yeah.
immediate. Regardless, I think even if we wanted to do a bigger plan down the road, we need to do something immediately in the.
When you get to that slide, we'll talk about that, but that's why it's under the emergency plan.
That makes sense, thank
And
you.
even though there is, as Jessica just pointed out, there is some room at the middle school. The problem is, remember a few years ago, we put in brand-new ventilation systems, which cut into it. Okay, so that, what do you want? Better. And during COVID, everybody wanted better ventilation. Okay, they have an improved heating system and all that.
Any other facilities-related questions? Yes,
I know I'm
please.
not part of the board, but I know, and this is a broad question, and it just kind of popped in my head. I know you guys are going out to bid for transportation. What are the rules and regulations regarding the start time of school? And the reason I ask that is because your high school and your middle school are on the same piece of property. And would it reduce bus runs if they started at the same time?
They actually are on the same bus run.
Oh, okay.
So that is the reason why they actually aren't exactly on the same time. The students are riding, middle school students and high school students ride on the same bus. They do the drop off at the high school, then they loop around and do the middle
Well,
school,
that answers my
and vice
question.
versa. So
Okay.
that's one of the reasons. In part of the RFP conversation, we are looking like how close can we maybe get with Lincoln and, that kind of thing, without moving the start times too much.
Just a broad question, I didn't know that, I didn't know the times, I didn't know they took the same bus run.
Yes. So we have, three tiers, but there's a lot of overlap.
I think that's a great idea. It's obviously a very significant cost, looking into any type of ride share you can do with Lincoln. But I think the student registry is important as well, because
Yes.
I feel like there's a lot of empty buses driving around.
Absolutely. So I have we just recently formed a policy subcommittee with the school committee, and actually was on my agenda, and I didn't get to it today to book those meetings, but it's on my
I think
to-do
that's a
list.
great idea.
But I do have a draft policy that we're starting to look at, and we're trying to also match what Lincoln is going to be moving to. They have the same type of policy that we have, where just anybody can be riding around and waiting for a bus. So if you, right now, if you had a student that has not been taking the bus all year, and you just show up at the bus stop, they're gonna let you on, because we're holding a seat. And so we really do need to tighten that up. You can't do that with statewide. Many other districts don't have that practice for the very reason. So
But
that is something that we're gonna.
that was definitely a practice, I know in Lincoln when COVID happened and we went back to school, we had to sign up for our child to take the bus because there was only so many people that could be on the bus.
Right, when you're at the 6 feet apart and all that
So
crazy stuff,
it's
right?
something that can be done,
Absolutely.
it's something that has been done in the past during that time,
So we're actually articling our policy over, if Charo has that already in place, and so does statewide. So if the student then, says, I'm not gonna take the bus, like I said, now you need to make an adjustment for family reasons or what have you. You're just gonna update the form, depending on, if there's an existing bus stop, then it may be no issue. If we need to reroute, because now we close the bus stop because no one's coming there, it might take a few days, but we'll still accommodate if you're eligible. So that's where we're going. Again, it has not been approved and has not been fully discussed with my school committee team back there, but it is something that we're looking at.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Any questions on the athletics? All right, ready for Oh, go ahead.
My 2 cents about the volleyball, if there's a demand for it, I mean, the cost is probably peanuts in the big scheme of this budget.
Yeah, that was my question, how much?
Well, so there's like $10,000 for this year, which would be kind of drilling into the floor and putting in the posts that you would kind of need to be able to do that piece. And then there's, the actual net, the equipment, what have you, would have been phase 2. And then there's the cost of the coaches, now adding an additional cost to our interscholastic league, uniforms, supplies, and now you have that rolling cost that there's now an ongoing. So it's not even so much about the $20,000 to $30,000 that you need to start it, it's then that ongoing cost. And in that conversation, we just felt that if we're cutting teachers, we're cutting other things, it just seemed like the focus, we're moving that focus around education to athletics, and I know it's important, but where we were making cuts, it just didn't seem appropriate to be cutting educational resources to add another sport when we do have quite a few sports. That's just where we were at.
I would argue that physical activity and organized sports and clubs is every bit as important as academics, especially at that age. I mean, there's so many life lessons learned on the field.
Agreed. Again,
Just
and
one
so,
thing
yeah, go ahead.
to answer your question, there was an overwhelming demand the past 3 years for this. Students
Wow.
went to the athletic director, specifically asked for it. I believe, and I know this was before your time, and Mr. Castiglia is not here to correct me, but I believe it was initially boys that had requested it. When he put the sign-up sheets up, there was an overwhelming demand from girls. And that's been a couple of years ongoing that he's been approached for this, yes, for volleyball. And I think this board has some volleyball experience. She can tell you it's one of the best sports in this.
This board really wants volleyball. She's a volleyball coach in her spare time.
I think it's a great idea.
To her point earlier, though, it's really hard to justify when we're talking about.
When you're making cuts. And you're right, it feels like it's nothing, but all of those things do add up. So, yeah.
If I
Tough
may,
decision.
one of the considerations too, if you're talking about athletics in general, was mentioned earlier about the fact that the trainer was initially funded at $70,000 last year, and it's one of those things I consider that made this year's current budget go from fact to fiction, is just a cut, because I had to cut. It went down to $35,000, now you can't hire a trainer, and it's not a mandate, so there's nobody at each athletic program to evaluate concussion protocol, injury status, whether a player should stay in or out, whether or not emergency medical services are required or anything like that, which is why they encourage trainers. So if it were to, when they made that cut last year, inadvertently, they created a situation where not only do you not have volleyball, you don't have a trainer. But we got $35,000 we can move somewhere if we need it, because we're not getting a trainer. And that's one of the things that you're trading off when you're making these decisions.
To get to a balance.
Coaches on training in
Not the
evaluating
level
concussion.
that-
Right, it's,
Trainers
yeah,
on.
these are actual, right.
The Interscholastic League has very specific regulations about what qualifies as a trainer, and they have a lot of specific training, guided,
You have to have a degree, but it's, yeah.
skills and evaluation
It's a
of injury.
certified position. Our coaches do have concussion, like to be able to, be aware and be able to, assess the student, but they're not.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of CPR classes last
Right,
week.
CPR class, all those coaches do CPR, concussion, and a whole host of other trainings, but they're not equipped to actually be able to address some special needs. It's more of an awareness and just students receive.
Any other athletics inquiries? All right, let's,
And then there was the medical and dental one. Again, out of my control. And the town's gonna have the same issue. They budgeted the same numbers that we did, because they were getting the same answers that we got from the trust. And I'm sure Caitlin's going, okay, I'm gonna have the same issue in her budget. When you hear, however, how that affects the rest of the town, they're gonna see the same increases. So you're gonna see that across all departments, not just ours.
I think there was a few towns that had up to 17%.
Yes, actually, we did our, right?
Compared to other
Agreed,
cities and
yeah,
towns,
so it was
I think we
on
did
that.
okay.
I mean, is that we prepaid it by having higher increases last year, so there was less of an increase
I
this
think
year?
it's all based
Based on
on
experience.
claims and
Claims
and all that
and
stuff, yeah.
sometimes you
Yeah,
get, you see
but-
the credits, but.
Yeah.
It's all across the state.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, it's not even a government issue, it's a state issue.
let's,
And then,
um,
we already talked about, I think, that.
yeah, I did have a question on the capital improvement. What is our expected reimbursement on from the state for the different projects like the lavatories and,
So all of that would still get the 35%.
okay.
Right now, all of those extra bonuses that they had over the last handful of years, those all expired last year, I believe. So now we're just back to our straight percentage based on our low income ranking, and so it's at 35%.
And does that typically hit in the same fiscal year, or is that usually a following fiscal year, or vary?
It depends on the level of spending. Some of them, they will reimburse immediately the following year, and I don't remember exactly what the thresholds are, but we have one reimbursement that's going over 3 years, others may go over 5 years,
Okay.
depending on how much money you spend on a particular project.
And typically, it's the fiscal year after the one you
Yeah,
have.
at the
After,
end,
right.
sure.
One other thing on the capital, right, it's up there. Okay. It's mentioned that, you know, the plan, I think, does it show you 600 to 650,000, okay. Last year, town gave us $500,000 to do capital. The bulk of that, all of that money went for 2 emergency plans, which were the culinary room and the special ed, okay? It straddled the fiscal year, and also for the Phase 2 project, the Phase 2 plan, which is, you have to do Phase 2, or you don't get 35%, because that leads to Phase 3 and Phase 4. So Phase 2 planning was done. That's paid for by the town. It was already paid. It's done. You've done it. Now it comes to show me the money. Because if you don't spend the money, you're going to lose your 35%. What happens is the state of Rhode Island, when they look through these things, if communities don't support these plans that they go through, they put you, first of all, at the bottom of the pile when they approve them. And secondly, they look at you like, oh, why are we going to do that? You didn't last time. So what we had, and we spent a number of nights at the school committee, a couple of meetings, agonizing over how to break all these expenditures up for 5 years. Because the Phase 2 is a 5-year program, and it shows what improvements need to be made. The bulk of them are at the high school, a couple at the middle school, right? And the elevator is not an emergency thing. That was not even part of it, okay? That's something that has come on. But a lot of it was bathrooms. That's only 4 bathrooms. That's a big school. A lot of bathrooms, and they're all 1966 vintage. That's when the school was built, okay? And they all need to be, I'm going to say all, probably all, have asbestos, tiles have to be taken out, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully, a lot of the plumbing won't be complicated, okay? But that could be something, and you don't know that until you tear the wall.
Now, where do we recognize that reimbursement? So, I mean, we have local appropriation, we have state aid, we have
that's not-
transportation offset, so when we get
That's not, if you're looking at
reimbursements.
that big list, that's not anything on it. This is strictly under our capital.
So when the reimbursements come back from the state, they are credited to,
The town.
The town.
okay,
That goes into the town treasury.
all right, thank you. So the town provides the capital funding, but then gets the reimbursement back directly.
Yeah, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
Some of it needs to go back into
Yes,
the.
so whatever,
Yeah, go back.
right, whatever projects were expensed out of that capital reserve fund, the reimbursement goes back into that capital
Yeah,
reserve.
Right. The exception are the bond issues that are out there now because the town is paying the principal and the interest on
So
it.
the
So that all goes
reimbursement
into
we
the
get
town's
from the
books.
bond goes back up to the town because we paid the bond.
So back to this one here, there's figure 800,000, that's the figure that we worked on as a school committee. We sent it to the town council. Town council approved it. Now, I know they had one question. Do we have to put this money in every year? Because it wasn't just 800,000. The whole, I don't remember the whole plan, but it was so much every year for 5 years, okay? And the answer, no, you don't have to. But it's also, if you approve 800,000, the idea is not 100,000, okay?
Right.
It's something close, okay? The state looks at good faith on that. all right? But again, the cost to put it together has already been paid.
Yeah.
If we don't do the work, it's like, we'll just pay the guy to give us an estimate. That's an important thing that you gotta look at on all those things.
Any other capital improvement questions or inquiries? All right, let's move forward.
And then really, I think this is the capital expenditure, I think was the last bucket of money here.
Yeah, I didn't have any questions on this one.
Yes, that is not in the town budget.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Does anyone have any other capital-related questions? Or,
Yeah.
Did you have a
No, I was
comment?
gonna say,
Okay.
you know, and I know, because Caitlin and John and Bob and I have had conversations around, you know, there was a minor typo in the original budget that really does have a discrepancy of what the town is allocating to us. Again, this is not about the number I'm under the impression is still $500,000.
Yes.
The starting point, it was an error, and they've acknowledged that, but, you know, so we're going on good faith that that is, you know, still happening.
Yes.
This piece is not captured in the town's proposal. I think you see the $800,000, and there was $200,000 allocated there. The rest of it did not make it into the budget when it was submitted. Then again, I'm under the impression of good faith that this request will make its way to you, or I don't know how to fix that. I don't know the logistics of how to make that happen, but we'd like to make sure that this gets entered into the record as a request from the town, from the school department to the town. Because again, making sure, if this bucket of money, there's the 800,000 and then there's the additional 500,000, if that does not make it through the process for the town to approve, I'm now an additional $500,000 short of what I need to operate next year.
So that 880 figure she showed you, take it 1.3.
Yeah, exactly. Glad you mentioned that. No, that's a good catch. And again, it's not about, you know, anything other than it just didn't make it in there.
All right, let's see what's next. Still capital.
This was just a summary of what was put in there.
All right, for the fund balance, as a general question,
Yes.
what percent of our budget is the fund balance, and what's best practice? Like, what's the expectation that you maintain
How
as a
many
school?
accountants are there in the state of Rhode Island? There's that many best practice, and I'm not kidding when I say that. Some years ago, we had an audit done. It was what's up, the typical audit, what's it called? The performance audit, excuse me, performance audit. That particular gentleman, when they said it, they said we should have like something like $10 million for our fund balance, okay? Every year I ask this question, every year, a lot of times we have different accounts. And I'm kind of getting a very steady thing from accountants of you should have 2 to 3 months of your expenses. This year, the town accountant said 4.5%, okay, of your overall budget. So what are we looking at, about $47 million. So 4.5% is what he said, okay? And again, but here's what I want to emphasize on the fund balance. As it's mentioned, we have some reserve accounts that we set up. Those are essential to keep this budget from blowing to pieces, okay? They've been in effect over 20 years, and they are on items that I use the term budget busters, things that can take you in the middle of the year, you have a balanced budget, and they can throw you way off. Special ed tuitions, because the way special ed works is it's not as simple as, well, we know the kid's going to be in the class this year. The kid moves in on November 1st or March 1st or whatever the date may be. And what level? There's so many different levels of special education. Maybe they just need a speech pathologist type, that, or not. Maybe they need to go out of district to, there's lots of these things. And these things can be up over $100,000, okay? Right. So they bust your budget right away, okay? Transportation, if you need an extra bus. I think we're running on, right now, buses are about 100,000, a little over 100,000 for a bus. And now, we are going through an entire process now, where we're going to be putting that out to bid, and we're also going through some processes, as Lisa's mentioned, where we're going to hopefully reduce the number of buses we have. But let's just say we have a set number of buses, and we need to add another bus. There's $100,000, boom, right there. And we don't know what part of the year it might come in, or whatever. Utilities, they've been doing really good. We've invested a lot of money in the district on things like electric, heating. We have gas heat everywhere, okay? And it's a lot more than when we had, a lot less than it would be when we had oil heat. However, we all know what's happening with utility bills, okay? Now, we're past a lot of the season, but I don't know what's going to be going on there. So that's another one we put them in there. And then last are other tuitions. The way other tuitions work, and this is the kid who all of a sudden goes to Davies or to wherever, we don't know. School opens and we get, within 30 days, we get a bill. Pay this bill. We had no clue where the kid was or whatever, Didn't show up for our, first period of math class, but that's all we knew, right? And then we get a bill. Those things, added to wherever the tuition she's already showed to comes, all four of those things can fill the budget.
So actually, there's a good question. For those out-of-district placements, the CTEs, is that pay in advance for the full year, or is there some sort of monthly division?
Yeah, we get a quarterly bill, and then it's prorated. So if the student was only there for 30 days out of the 90 days that they're billing, they still only bill us the 30, but they do it quarterly based on attendance. But it's also on us, our due diligence, to make sure that they're attending and that they are, going to the program. So there is a little bit of checking. Residency is always, that first bill, we make sure that they're really our students, they didn't move in the meantime, all of those things to make sure that those numbers.
And that's October, and the budget process finished up in May.
Right.
So basically, those items, I think the 510,000 you have there, the school committee hasn't really adjusted those. We do every few years, we look at them. All right, now we're going to have new bus things now. He's going to tell us what new special ed rates are, and we're going to put some things in there. So the 510 might be, I'm just making a number of 550, who knows what it is. Point is that's untouchable fund balance. The reason I'm getting at this is the idea that fund balance is a piggy bank that you can just break into. It isn't, okay? Another item, it's not here in the budget, but it's in the town plans, and that is the town's capital plan. Town has capital plans, so where money's going to come from. The bulk of the money from the schools either comes from our budget or from bond issues. However, our equipment, our trucks, specifically is supposed to come out of fund balance. Right now, that's $409,000. We're presently doing a new capital plan, so I'm assuming they're going to put probably 4% a year. It was done 2 years ago. That's kind of what the number they were using in terms of inflation, so they'll probably pop that in. So that number will come up, almost 450 or something there. There's money that can't be touched. Other things we've used the capital fund, these funds for fund balance. Things such as when we do building, we try to make all the money go to the actual project of the school, whether it be nailing something down or cementing something down or whatever. And the architects, etc., we take that money out of fund balance. Okay, we try it, okay, where we can. We also use it for equipment. A few years ago, we put in a new track. We had equipment that was almost from 1966, okay, the hurdles and all that. We bought the equipment, but we took it from the fund balance. Okay, we're bringing up the volleyball. The volleyball, we could right now out of fund balance, because it's not a lot of money. We could put the supports in. We could buy the equipment, but the operating budget doesn't have the money to put the coach, etc. But those are the type of things we get out of fund balance. Bottom line is, fund balance, we just can't go in there and take, what is the number here? 500,000, when we take the science kits and the computer kit and all that sort of stuff, $500,000. If we did that, we're getting dangerously low. We're already under that guy's 4.5%, or figure out 2 to 3 months, you can use that method too. So those are all, they're pretty thin right there. And I think that's all I have right now on that. So I have one other thing, something else.
Any other fund balance questions? All right, let's go on to the next.
I think we might.
Okay, I do have something on this one.
Sure.
Shocker. All right, so this is more a commentary and a statement of concern. As I look through the percentage of our total revenue that state aid is. We're going from, at the beginning of this chart, about 15% of our total revenue is state aid. And then it stays roughly similar or flat for 5 or 6 years, 16, 15, 7. But then starting about 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, it starts ticking up 17.4, 17.8. In the FY 23-24 year, it went to 20.7, 22.6, 23.8. And then this year, the recommendation is 24.79% of our overall budget is coming from state aid. Just as a general statement, that's getting to very dangerous territory. Or actually, it's not getting it, it's in very dangerous territory. Because if the state decides not to deliver, we are up a creek. If they do a clawback, a couple years ago, they did a clawback of state aid. And
And look on that year, and you'll see, I believe you're looking at fiscal year 18, where we got a big amount, 17, 18, we got a large amount, and then they took a large amount back in 18, 19. Go over to town. The town all of a sudden had to come up with a lot of money.
Yep.
Okay, and so, I'll comment in a couple seconds, finish your question.
So again, I don't have a direct question on this. It's more so just a little grandstanding to say, watch out as we look at this budget, because that's scary to me, because that turns into a one-time tax assessment to the residents of the town. It turns into depleting the town's reserve fund. It turns into some really bad things for the town getting too weighted with the state aid. And I think we're seeing some of the outcome of that in Cranston right now, too.
Yeah, Cranston, the northeastern, I was just mentioning the same reason. They're getting actually a cut in state aid, so they're now, dealing with the same types of problems. The intent is not to have, as the state increases, the town either level funds or barely gives anything. That is, it's not really meant to offset it. They're giving an increase for a reason, but there's still all of the other contractual requirements, the inflation, all of that piece still needs to sustain. So although when you look at it combined, we may be getting an increase together, but it's not keeping up with the expenses of what, and that's why the state's increasing. We need to be increasing at the same pace.
And what I would say about that is what bothers me, and what's nice about the data is you can actually go back and you can see in those first 2 years there where the town had 3.7, 3.22. And then it hits this streak, with the exception of that one year where all of a sudden had to pony up a lot. And what bothers me is that, I gotta tell you, there's not a school committee person in the state of Rhode Island, there's not a town council, city council, or mayor, or whatever in the state of Rhode Island that doesn't complain about state mandates. Unfunded state mandates. So what you're doing when what Smithfield has done is they have counted on the state aid to reduce the town portion, and therefore, it keeps the taxes low. I'm a taxpayer. I don't want to pay a ton of taxes, but it keeps your taxes low there. Now, this excess money they give you, you're not spending on those unfunded state mandates that everybody and his brother is complaining about. So what should be done, and Superintendent's exactly right, the faculty and staff, the keeping the lights on, all that stuff that comes around a building, it should be by the town. I don't care what town you are. It should be by the town, and you should be using some of this money for those mandates that they're putting on us. Now, we do get some from special ed, well, that's federal, I guess, but whatever. We get some funds there. But that's where that excess should be coming, should be going into that. And you look at those numbers, and that hits me every year.
And for clarification, that 24.79 that we're looking at this year, that's if the town goes with a 4%
And up
increase.
at the top is the 4%
Right.
increase, down at the bottom is the impact if it's the 1.45.
Yep.
It's just numbers again,
Yep.
it's not a...
All right. I'm going to stop grandstanding on that topic. I think the point's made. But does anyone have any questions on the revenue? This is the type of data that we love, so I appreciate that you put this together. I ran out of questions finally, so yeah.
So mine is an overall. I have a lot of points that we talked about. I appreciate everything you've done. I really have. Okay? Smithfield has some decisions to make. How many people in the gallery are Smithfield residents? What's your tax bills this year and next year? So I wrote I took 2 months to do this. It's online. I gave it to the town council in January. Only 2 comments came back. I went over it with this committee in February. Now, as of March, go look at it. Go look at it. It's 5 years of Auditor General data. And I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of this today. And if some people don't like it, Richard, I love your comment about fund balance. Watch where I'm going to go with this. The fiscal 2027 budget has a $1.2 million withdrawal from the fund balance. I can only speculate why, I'm not going to do it on the record. $1.2 million withdrawal.
This year.
The year.
But this, what we're doing now. So what we're doing is doing exactly what you said. You make $10,000 a month in cash in your family, but you're spending 12. Where does the 12 come from? Either a credit card or your savings account. We have lost $4.5 million since 2020. A 48% increase in our fund balance. Not including, and I'm still getting the numbers from you, not including, I don't have the new one from fiscal 26, but I also don't know what's going to happen. Fiscal 25, sorry, fiscal 26. That's already paid for. Richard, I do have to correct you. GFOA says you have to have 16.7% in your fund balance. That's 2 months of revenue / expenses. They don't really
Well,
care.
it's not correcting me, I'm just asking
No.
every account in the state.
But I'm telling you, it's GFOA says that.
Yeah,
So
no, we definitely need more in there.
you talk about structural deficit. I agree with you. What did we do on the Smithfield side? I can only postulate why. Okay, gets worse, guys. So what's the effect of the fund balance? Can I tell you? Unrated. Now, I think Moody's and Standard & Poor's treat governments differently. I don't know that. But it's like if your savings account goes down and you go to buy a car, they don't look at what you have in your savings account. Your credit rating is partially based on your equity. Okay. It's going to affect something. And I'm saying this to both sides, so you don't think it's only one side. I'm saying it on both sides, okay? I don't know where we are going to get this money. I'm telling you. Both sides of Farnham Pike, because I'm not a political guy, need to start getting along and start looking at numbers, because the numbers don't lie. And it's going to get worse. So I am fully in favor of Overbrook, but here's the deal, and this amazing woman can tell you, that wasn't in the budget, so we're paying interest on that loan and no principal as of today. Right? So we have an interest-only loan, and we're paying the operating expenses of that building. The heat and insurance and all that. That's not in this budget, the one that we're doing right now. So we gotta find that money. And here's the other problem, and this is what you need to know. We don't have the new fire station that everyone in this town approved, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago. That's not even in the budget.
2018.
2018.
That's another side.
That's pretty far.
That one I will.
That is not in our budget. Neither is the operating expenses for that station. You see where I'm going with this? And I'm worried. I'm absolutely worried. And I appreciate everything you've said. I don't know how many times, did you count how many times I...
No, but thank you.
But
It's on record.
it's real. It's the first real conversation I've heard. Just so I don't... But it's the first real conversation we've had in the past 3 administrations. Okay? And I appreciate that. Because I'm willing to find the money wherever the hell it is. I just don't. And I'll say for the public record, and I said it at the meeting, these are, I will not vote for this budget if there's that 1.2%, 1.2 million. I won't. I won't do it. One last thing, to show you how bad it is on our side, What did we do a week ago? We looked at every office expense account, we flatlined them. That's how detailed we are looking at this. Trust me, we got better things to do than probably look at that level. And it wasn't a lot of money, but that's the level we are looking at to cut this budget. I don't want my taxes raised, I don't want your taxes raised, but I also don't want this town to go. We've got a belly up. And big boys, big girls, big homeowners, and so on. We're either gonna pay it now, or the fiscal '28 budget is gonna be a hell of a lot different, ladies and gentlemen. I have a great plan to develop the Overbrook. I'm not gonna tell you, I've already talked about it with one lawyer. He actually agrees with me. I think we could do something really wonderful to get that money back that we paid. I'll announce it. This is all gonna be on my blog very soon, so we in. I'm gonna be posting a lot of stuff. We gotta make some good decisions, and I hope you appreciate where I'm going. The money, it's like, I hate to say this, it's kind of the federal level. We don't have an unlimited pot. We don't have an unlimited pot.
If I may add, when you use 10% of the surplus, in order to put it back to where it was.
Correct.
You need to raise 11 to 12% more money.
It's hanging out,
Just to get equal.
Right.
That's exactly my.
And you have the counter inflation.
Correct. So we're gonna have, I think, Caitlin, if that budget passed today, it would be a 2.1, am I remembering that? Am I close percent, so the taxes would go up 2.1%? It may have to go up to 4. I'm trying to tell you this, I appreciate everything you've done. But we can't deficit spend, except when we do that, because that's a structural deficit.
Right.
Okay, that is a structural deficit. And I'm not grandstanding on this, I'm worried. And we better get real in this town.
A lot of hard
We did
decisions.
Just say one thing too.
Okay, thank you for listening.
Just say one thing with you. You know, I think, yeah, with you. I'll just say we should itemize our goals, and as a town, we should figure out where we want to be. And in 2 years, if we want the fund balance to be X, we got to figure out a plan to get there. And I think that's kind of what you're.
Because the only way we're gonna get there, if we keep taking money out, is to raise taxes.
Yeah.
Or go to the legislature to raise it over the cap. That's the only way we're gonna get it back, otherwise we're gonna run surpluses. And that's hard to do, and we all agree in this room, that's hard to do. You can't keep taking money out of your savings account in your house. If you're spending more than you make, which I was never brought up on, all right? You can't spend more than you make. Yeah, there's bad years. Gene, we may have a situation maybe with the snow thing, we may have to go at a little bit of loss or move some around. But I don't know, and that's what we're talking about. But that's different. That's different than making a planned choice to spend more than we take in.
But Ken, to that point, it's been going on for the last 5 or 6 years.
$4.5 million.
Right. In 2012, our population was 21,000. A long time ago, we're only at 22. So what's happening? We need to be careful with the budget,
We need to be careful.
you know, and spend it wisely.
I mean,
And
I don't know-
education is very wise.
Well, I'm an educator, so I believe in
I think
education.
so am I.
You know, probably the office supplies, I'm not asking for answers, probably 0.05% of the budget, I'm guessing. That's how much work my comrades have put in to flatline those costs and say, you just get as much paper clips as last year. Or whatever. Because we're gonna find the money somewhere.
And the other thing is to go to the meetings, town council meetings, and express your concerns.
I'd like to see more people that are talking about this. Don't take this for granted, please don't. Fire station overlook. Really good.
So with that, what other questions do we have for the school board, for the superintendent? Any parting questions?
I have actually a question, and it's more probably a review of the town council, but I kind of always thought Windsor School was actually sold. And I read an article recently, it still hasn't sold. And at some point, I guess it's going to sell. It would make sense to me, if it sells, that the money is put into capital for the town. I mean, it is, you know, they can't come up with money everywhere, but it's I don't remember what they were getting, but it is the type of thing, it is a recommendation you guys can make, but like I said, I was kind of shocked at what it is.
Well, Richard, do you know how many mistakes we made with that school? I'm not gonna
Oh,
go on the record, okay? And I mean, we're talking about
I
like
can
8
list
years
that one,
ago.
and I can list the fire station, but we don't have much time right now, so I can on that one.
All right. So I guess on the other side, what questions do you have for us on the process, or?
I just have one comment to make, because I know we have responded to all of the questions you asked.
Yes.
And there will be amendments to those responses.
Yeah.
And I'm going to only give you one example because it's something we did today, and I think it's important to understand that when I alluded to the athletic trainer, medical service line, where they started at 70, where they could hire somebody and then cut them down to 35. The same thing happened with the second question having to do with substitutes, where you pointed out there's very little spent. And as it turns out, because of circumstance, even I missed something that was going on during the transition of, I walk in, the payroll clerk had just quit, new payroll clerk in, payroll clerk works for about 5 weeks, the payroll clerk quits, somebody else moves into the position, and that payroll clerk quits, and we're using a substitute right now, waiting for the new payroll clerk that's been hired to come in. So, in the process, the payroll's getting done, but I wasn't getting posted. So when I told you in my answer that the payroll was now at 70% in March, in fact, February and March hadn't been posted yet, which I discovered today, knowing that the $600,000 budget actual expenditure in '25 was translated into a $470 in '26, but as of March, now that February and March did get posted before the last payroll clerk that quit left, it's now at 90+%, which means projection-wise, we will spend the same $600,000 that was spent in '25, but the budget's only $470 because they had to balance it. So what do? They cut substitute pay. But it doesn't cut the man. It cuts a number.
Yeah.
So you can, with school contracts, with sick days, vacations, not vacation days, with sick days, when somebody's out sick, you have to cover with a substitute. Your cost is there. You're not going to change it. When we went lean, and I told the school committee members that were in the meeting at the time, when you go lean on your staffing to say, we will only have a teacher for each class, and we will max out our class size, you better be ready to pay substitute pay, because somebody's going to get sick. And I'll just add this little caveat. The thought came across, well, what about paraprofessionals and stuff like that? Well, we looked into that. Virtually all the paraprofessionals, except maybe 2, are specific special education. The 2 that aren't actually substitute for secretaries and substitute for special ed paras when they're out sick. So they become the substitute pool before you need substitutes. My point is, this year's budget, in accommodating an appropriation, I hate to use the term, but if I was going to the New York Times, they would say, no, that's not a factual-based book. That's a thing. They created a hope that I'm not sure at this point, looking at the spending that has to happen, will actually come true. Because we are going to spend $600,000 on substitutes, and that money will have to come from some other line, or we will have a deficit.
Yep.
And so when I recalculate it and we look at the final answer to your question, it's going to say, no, we need $600,000. And I'm telling you, whether anyone wants to believe it or not, I won't be here. You will spend $600,000 next year on substitute pay. It's really not a negotiable situation because of the staffing structure. And the cost of substitutes, they haven't changed the rate, but people get sick, people get pregnant, people have families that they get time. It just is. So my point is, as I go through with the superintendent and we flesh out all of these numbers further and further with more detail, these answers will change and we will provide them to you as quickly as we can.
Fantastic. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm just going to ask both sides if I'm going to stop. Meaning, and I have a blog about it, I don't know if anybody's read it, what happened last year. Let's just, if you need to go in a room and have an argument with no press there, then just do it. These people, including myself, are busting our butts to try to find a way. We have a fiduciary responsibility, just like you two. We gotta make this work. I'm tired of the argument, I'm tired of the stone, I'm tired, I'm up to here. I'm really up to here. I'm tired, and I get personalities get to be part of this. Stop it. Oh, and I told this to the other side too. So don't think it. We gotta stop it and do what's best for our kids and what's best for our town.
Richard, I have a question, if you don't mind. Your fund balance, can you give me the history of it over the last 5 years? Has it stayed the same? Have you lost? Has it gone up? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I know it took a big hit when we put the track and field in. That's $2 million came right out of fund balance
Okay.
for the football field track.
So 5 years ago, what do you think it might have been at that point?
I think.
I can maybe go.
What happened?
let's do that as a-
I'd like to look at that and discuss
Yeah,
that with
I'll
the
just look at
board.
the audits from the past.
Yeah,
few
yeah.
years.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, we'll get that to you. I'll give you this, I'll send you this updated slide deck, and then we'll get you the assessment data and other things. So I'll put a little for you, Ian.
Yeah, through me and through Caitlin as well,
Okay, and you
please.
guys can disseminate. We'll work on that over the next few weeks.
All right.
There's no further
Any other
questions?
questions specific for the school department budget? All right. Moving on to line item
Thank you
E.
so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, first of
Appreciate your
all.
time and effort.
Anything for, we've had a great evening tonight. Does anyone on the board have anything they want to talk about for the general FY27 budget?
Only one thing, and just quickly,
And I will go to public comments as well if anyone did have anything.
I want to have a conversation about the charter council. I noticed this when I did the analysis of the whole budget. There are accounts that are not office supplies and materials accounts. I think we gotta, and I think you'd agree, and it's not your fault. It is probably been institutionalized since advocacy. Yeah, no, I understand. The only way we're gonna really do a good analysis is to
This is for evaluation purposes. I missed Ken's presentation when I was away.
Yeah, we can get you a copy of that presentation. Ken's presentation that they hand out.
I was last week.
Oh, you are.
Oh, but I gave it to them.
No, I didn't.
Chris is not here.
No, what I'm saying is it's there. It's now public. It's public.
Right.
I can print you one, Chris, if you want to come pick it up.
Now everybody in the world has it.
All right. Anything else on the FY27 proposal? No. Okay. Opening up, if anyone has any public comments.
You can't leave.
All right, going once?
Going twice.
Going twice?
Actually,
Oh, yes, please.
because I'm someone who's lived in the town for a very long time.
And could you state your name, please?
Jane Ramos.
Thank you.
I live at Eisenhower Drive, right over there. I've spoken before, my family's lived in town since 1956. We saw a lot of changes in this town. Because when my family moved here, there wasn't even a high school. So we have a high school. Junior high changed, moved to where it is in present location. I've been working as a teacher in the junior high, in the middle school now for 28 years. And you know, we're talking about all this budget, this is all, it's crucial and it's tough. And I think somebody made the comment that the continued level funding has put us in a real dire situation. And that's not any fault of any of us necessarily, but it's happened continually year after year. Lisa mentioned, you know, talking about the CTEs trying to keep our kids here in town. This is what we're trying to do, right? We're losing a lot of our kids. And having worked in the middle school, if I could just describe my day to day. I'm a science teacher. I'm using that program that Lisa talked about, Open SciEd, right? Trying my hardest to get kids to be engaged. I'm working in a room that is set up so that, because I can't use the science lab, they're used for other things. The science labs are really out of date anyway. I've got 14 huge tables in my room, backpacks I'm climbing over all the time. I don't have a beautiful lab. to teach my students in. And I've seen a lot of beautiful middle school labs in this state. Smithfield doesn't have them. Our high school got added on to, we have a pretty good science lab in high school. But, you know, I'm looking at my students thinking, I'd like to turn them on to the CTE programs that the high school will have, but I am so limited in how I can do that. I've also got the heating system that we tried to fix. I've got blowers that go so loud, I just have to have it off. So whatever we tried to fix, it was with stuff that was antiquated. The elevator's broken, and there's times when I've had to have one of my classes downstairs to accommodate that kid who's on crutches. But all my stuff for my labs are upstairs. I'm trying to carry stuff down, remember everything. This is what my days are like teaching in our middle school. And this is what it's like for our students. Another thing for our middle school students is we have given up a lot of our programming. We don't have the wonderful shop and home ec, and they have a lot of rigorous classes, academic classes. And we're talking about maybe taking some from the high school too. There won't be as many good programming because we just can't do it anymore. This is really quite sad. And it is serious, and I totally get how serious this budget crisis is. But I think mistakes have been made many years before this, and I'm sorry to say that, and it breaks my heart too. I just wanted to speak of what it's like to work in the schools here in Smithfield. Love the town. I'm living here myself after all the years that I grew up here too, but it saddens me.
As someone with a fifth grader this year who's getting ready to go to middle school next year and is pumped for it, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Anyone else have any comment?
No, if I can just echo Ken's comments about attending the town council meetings. I love the participation that happened here this evening. There's a recommendation that comes from this board, but your town council members are the ones that make the decision. And please, just ask for accountability. Last year, we had a vote with zero explanation to why they voted the way they did or what that number signified and how it should be spent. Zero. We need an explanation, especially from our town manager, right? He's not an elected official. What is your 5-year plan for our school districts if you're going to suggest funding at a 1.4? I'm not saying this in a contentious way. We need to understand the plan so that we can work alongside him with it.
So to build on that a little bit, the way the general process works is all the departments create their budget requests for the coming year. They submit them to the town manager, who then consolidates and modifies as he needs to or sees fit. He then submits that to our board, and where we do the deep dive into everything. I mean, literally looking at paper clips. And then from there, we put a proposal together for the town council. We have a meeting where we read it out with them, and then they vote on it. And as Ms. Salas said last year, it was a zero discussion vote where they cut our recommendation in half from what we had recommended. So definitely, participation is important in the process at all stages of levels.
And very quickly to your comment, I agree with you, and it's happened on both sides. You see how many times I said based on the past 2 or 3 administrations, because I've heard better today than I've heard in the last 12
I
years.
could not disagree.
Okay?
I mean, I could not agree more.
And so I feel like, what's the real story sometimes, okay? I want the real story. And I'll do whatever I can, but these 7 people, I don't like this. I mean, I don't like what we're gonna have to do over the next 3 to 5 weeks. It's gonna be hard.
Well, the problem is that we have
There's
to,
no place to go.
we've been spending a lot in other places. We
Yes.
need to pull the reins on those and
We need to
focus them where they should be spent.
Any other?
Thank you for the time
Thank
and
you.
effort listening.
Thank you.
We're putting hours and hours into this budget, and they're not compensated for it, just so we're clear on that too. I mean, hours of detailed
Yes.
work, line by line,
Appreciate you.
looking through these things, and we appreciate the efforts that go in, regardless of your recommendation.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All right. Thank you all.
So,
Now, I'd like to encourage everyone to wrap up outdoors tonight. LaBerge has a fundraiser there. Let them know that you are there to support LaBerge. Some of the proceeds go.